2014, Elizabeth Holmes was the youngest self-made female billionaire in American history. She was 30 years old. Her company, Theranos, promised to revolutionize medicine, to detect hundreds of diseases from a single drop of blood, faster and cheaper than anything that had ever existed. The technology didn't work. $9 billion, 11 years, hundreds of thousands of patients. This is how it happened. Anatomy of greed. What you're about to see lasted 11 years. Hundreds of thousands of patients trusted this company with their health, not just their money. And for most of that time, the people who were supposed to protect you looked the other way. Her name was Patricia Sawyer. She was 58 years old. She had been managing a thyroid condition for several years, and her doctor had ordered routine blood tests to monitor her hormone levels. When a Theranos collection center opened at the Walgreens near her home in Arizona, she used it, as instructed by her pharmacy. It was cheaper than the hospital lab. It was supposed to be just as accurate. The results came back abnormal. Her doctor adjusted her medication accordingly. Months later, she was retested at a conventional laboratory. Her levels had been normal the entire time. She had spent months taking medication she didn't need, based on a test result that was simply wrong. She was not reckless. She was a patient. She did exactly what her doctor told her to do. She was not the exception. She was the rule. To understand how a company was allowed to run blood tests on hundreds of thousands of real patients using technology it knew didn't work, we need to go back to where this story started. Elizabeth Holmes enrolled at Stanford University in 2002 at the age of 18. She was studying chemical engineering, and from the beginning, by every account, she was driven by a single idea. She was afraid of needles. More specifically, she was afraid of the barriers that traditional blood testing created for patients. The large volumes of blood required, the cost, the wait time, the need to visit a lab. She believed, deeply, that those barriers were killing people. That early detection of disease, made accessible and affordable, could save millions of lives. She dropped out of Stanford at 19 to found a company. She called it Theranos, a portmanteau of therapy and diagnosis. The pitch was simple and extraordinary. One small drop of blood, from a finger prick, not a vein, could be analyzed by a proprietary device called the Edison, capable of running hundreds of diagnostic tests simultaneously. Faster than any existing laboratory, more accurate, and cheap enough that anyone could afford it. Silicon Valley believed her. By the early 2010s, Theranos had raised over $900 million from investors including Tim Draper, Larry Ellison, and Rupert Murdoch. It had signed a partnership with Walgreens to operate blood testing centers inside its pharmacies nationwide. It had signed contracts with the U.S. military to test the technology in battlefield conditions. At its peak, in 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes was worth, on paper, $4.5 billion. She graced the covers of Fortune, Forbes, and Time in the same 12-month period. The comparisons to Steve Jobs were everywhere. She had even adopted the uniform, the black turtleneck, the minimalist aesthetic, the reality distortion confidence. But there was a problem that had existed since the beginning. A problem that every scientist who had ever worked closely with the Edison technology had encountered. The device didn't do what Holmes said it did. And the people who raised that concern inside the company, one by one, were silenced, discredited, or forced out. Part of what made Theranos so difficult to question was who stood behind it. Elizabeth Holmes had assembled a board of directors that read like a directory of American in power. George Shultz, former Secretary of State. James Mattis, former Marine General, later Secretary of Defense. Henry Kissinger. William Perry, former Secretary of Defense. 2 former U.S. Senators, a former director of the CDC. None of them had a background in medicine, laboratory science, or diagnostics. Their presence was not operational. It was reputational. A signal to investors, to partners, to the press. If these men believe in it, the technology must be real. The press did its part. Major publications ran extensive profiles celebrating Holmes without ever consulting independent experts about whether the technology actually worked. The editorial and medical communities operated in separate silos, and Holmes was careful never to let them intersect. And the regulatory environment gave Theranos a critical opening. By classifying its laboratory as operating under certain federal exemptions for small volume tests, the company was able to avoid the rigorous external validation that FDA approval would have required. Holmes understood precisely which doors to walk through and which inspections to avoid. The result was a company worth $9 billion that had never been independently verified to work. Here is what Theranos was actually doing. For a small number of tests, those that genuinely could be adapted for small blood volumes, the Edison device was used. But for the vast majority of the hundreds of tests Theranos offered, the company was using standard commercial laboratory equipment, machines made by Siemens and other manufacturers, the same machines used by conventional labs everywhere. The problem was that even for those conventional tests, Theranos was running them on diluted fingerstick samples. A drop of blood from a finger prick is a different substance than blood drawn from a vein. It is diluted with tissue fluid, and that dilution affects results. The machines were not designed for that input. The results were unreliable. Scientists inside the company knew this. Laboratory directors raised it. At least one quality control director, alarmed by error rates she was seeing in internal testing, documented her concerns and was eventually forced out. Later testimony would reveal that result variability inside Theranos' own testing was, in some cases, catastrophically high. Ramesh Balwani, Holmes' romantic partner and the company's president and COO, managed operations with a culture of intimidation. Employees who raised scientific concerns were met with accusations of disloyalty. Non-disclosure agreements were weaponized. The legal team was used aggressively against anyone who might talk. One of the most striking examples involves Tyler Shultz, the grandson of board member George Shultz. Tyler had joined Theranos as a young scientist, and within months, identified serious problems with the accuracy of the company's tests. He brought his concerns to Elizabeth Holmes directly. She dismissed them. He escalated to the state regulators. Theranos sent its lawyers after him. His own grandfather, who had invested in the company and believed in Holmes, initially sided with the company over his grandson. Tyler Shultz eventually cooperated with investigators. It cost him years of his life and enormous personal strain. The technology didn't work. The results were unreliable. The company knew. And every day it kept operating, real patients were getting those results. Between 2013 and 2016, Theranos ran an estimated 900,000 blood tests on real patients through its Walgreens partnership, primarily in Arizona and California. Those tests informed real medical decisions. Doctors adjusted medications. Patients were told they had, or didn't have, conditions that required treatment. Some patients received false positives for serious diseases, including HIV and cancer, and lived through the terror of that diagnosis before being retested elsewhere. In 2016, after the company came under regulatory scrutiny, Theranos voided and corrected 2 years of test results, hundreds of thousands of individual reports. It notified patients and doctors that results they had relied upon for medical decisions might be invalid. The medical consequences of those corrected results, the medications taken unnecessarily, the procedures delayed, the anxiety caused, were never fully quantified. They were not the kind of harm that shows up easily in a financial settlement. Theranos called it proactive patient outreach. The patients called it something else. The person who broke Theranos was not a regulator. It was not a competitor. It was a newspaper reporter. John Carreyrou was an investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal. In early 2015, he received a tip from someone connected to the company that Theranos' technology might not work as advertised. He spent months quietly reporting, speaking to former employees under the cover of confidentiality, piece by piece, building the picture that no investor, no board member, and no regulator had assembled. When he contacted Theranos for comment before publication, the company dispatched its lawyers. They sent cease and desist letters. They threatened litigation. They called his sources liars. Holmes herself called the WSJ's editor-in-chief and demanded the story be killed. The story ran on October 15, 2015. What followed happened faster than almost anyone expected. Federal regulators from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services inspected Theranos' Newark, California lab and found conditions so deficient that they cited the company for posing immediate jeopardy to patient safety. Holmes was banned from operating labs for 2 years. The Walgreens partnership was terminated. The Safeway partnership, never publicly disclosed, was quietly dissolved. In 2018, the SEC charged Holmes and Balwani with fraud. The Department of Justice followed with criminal indictments. The company, valued at $9 billion just 4 years earlier, was dissolved in September 2018. It had never generated meaningful revenue. It had never produced a validated, FDA-approved diagnostic product. And Patricia, who had adjusted her thyroid medication for months based on a Theranos result, learned, only years later, through news coverage of the trial, exactly what had happened to her. She had never been informed directly. There was no personal apology. There was no compensation offered. There was a press release. Let's look at what accountability looked like. In January 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was convicted on 4 counts of criminal fraud, specifically for defrauding investors. She was acquitted on charges related to defrauding patients. In November 2022, she was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. She reported to custody in May 2023, with appeals still pending. Ramesh Balwani was convicted on all 12 counts against him, including patient fraud. He was sentenced to nearly 13 years. The SEC reached a civil settlement with Holmes for $500,000 and a 10-year ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company. And the patients? No dedicated patient compensation fund was established. Patients who suffered medical harm from incorrect test results were directed to pursue individual legal claims, a process inaccessible to most of them. 11 years of a company. $0 for the patients who trusted it with their health. Before we close, 5 things you should take with you. 1. When a company's board of directors is filled with famous names but no domain experts, ask why. Theranos' board had former secretaries of state and defense, but not a single clinical laboratory scientist, pathologist, or FDA regulatory specialist. Prestige is not the same as expertise. In healthcare especially, the two must coexist. 2. Be deeply skeptical of any technology, especially in medicine, that cannot be independently validated before deployment. Holmes refused to publish peer-reviewed data. She refused third-party testing. She cited trade secrets. In science, secrecy and verification are incompatible. If a company won't let experts examine what it's selling, that refusal is the answer. 3. Pay attention to how a company treats internal dissent. Multiple scientists inside Theranos raised concerns. They were dismissed, intimidated, and legally threatened. A company that weaponizes its legal department against employees asking scientific questions has replaced accountability with control. 4. When the press coverage of a company is entirely celebratory and never technical, be cautious. Every major profile of Holmes between 2013 and 2015 focused on her vision, her story, her black turtleneck. None asked an independent laboratory scientist whether the technology was real. Admiration is not due diligence. 5. Watch for companies that structure themselves to avoid the regulations designed to protect you. Theranos deliberately classified its tests to sidestep FDA approval requirements. Whenever a company in healthcare, food, finance, or any regulated industry finds a way around oversight rather than through it, that navigation itself should raise a question. Theranos was not a company that tried and failed. It was a company that knew and kept going. Elizabeth Holmes built a story so compelling that the people paid to ask hard questions chose not to ask them. The board didn't. The investors didn't. The press didn't. And patients paid for that silence with their health. The next episode covers a man who did the same thing, not with blood tests, but with billions of dollars of other people's money. And he did it faster than anyone thought possible. He was 30 years old. He was worth $40 billion on paper, and none of it was real. Anatomy of Greed.